I do see there is a little bit of a quorum now. I mean, we've got at least 10 students, if I can get my count here correct. So why don't we start with some fun trivia, so whoever wants to answer it, just raise your hand, using your Zoom. No cheating, you're on your computer, so don't look up the answer. So who can tell me, when was the first COP held and where? Veda? Is your hand up, Veda? No. Anybody else? Vidya?
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to get my hand to be raised on Zoom, but I believe it was in Germany in, I want to say 1995.
Yeah, 1995 in Berlin. Okay, so COP28, it literally means this is a 28th Conference of Parties. This is a UN, you can call it the highest level global meeting on climate change, spearheaded by United Nations. And this year was the 28th one. So I know 28 years is a long time. It's probably more than double the age of most of the student participants here. So you might be wondering that what has the world accomplished in 28 years? Not much. We've been meeting every year, 28 years, year after year, making promises, breaking them over and over again. And here we are in COP28, right? So everything that Radhika said, why is COP28? It is a very different COP for many reasons. One is it was being hosted by, it just got hosted by UAE, Dubai, which is one of the biggest oil producers in the world. So a lot of people found the optics of that pretty troubling. Everybody thought that this is a backroom dealing for oil and gas producers, and there is nothing good is going to come out of it. Second, as Radhika said, this COP really did provide a platform for many different types of conversations. Education was one. Another one that I noticed was pretty compelling was there was a faith pavilion there. And I think people representing different faiths from around the world were invited to be part of the conversation. Health, I believe, is also, I know Sonali will be here later and she can speak more to it, but there was certainly something different about this COP in the sense that I believe there's finally a recognition that climate change itself is not a fringe conversation to be held by politicians and deal brokers, sitting in some conference rooms and hashing out and negotiating the future of humanity, right? And it affects every aspect of life. So we need to have a seat at the table for many different representatives, right? So I found that to be a very positive thing, right, to going into COP. Second, it is the largest participation, right? 70,000 people were present there, right? And Ishan, Vidya, Radhika, and Wen, four of them are here with us, and they'll talk to us about their personal experience. What did they experience? What was their expectation going in, and how did they feel coming out of it, right? So we'll get into all of that. But coming back to the point that, we've been talking about climate change and human impact on climate change. This is not a new idea. In fact, it dates back to the Greek times, ancient Greeks, that they discovered that humans can actually alter climatic patterns, right? So this is not a new idea. But as late as 1890s, I was reading some history on it. In fact, some scientists discovered in 1890s that human activity can actually increase global temperatures. But at that time, it was thought of something positive. That, okay, we don't mind a little bit warmer world because we probably had too many areas in the world which were too cold, right? But right around 1950s or so, I think the scientific community had started to coalesce around this idea that there is a clear pattern. Human activity since the Industrial Revolution has been contributing towards carbon emissions related to Industrial Revolution, and human activity are contributing to increasing global temperatures, right? So this idea is not new. Knowledge is not new. We recognize that this is something we are causing. And then we also recognize that there are a lot of negative impacts to our environment, which are obviously affecting human life, right? So why are we what do we expect to accomplish from these COPs, right? And what can we all do? And what did Radhika, Venven, Vidya, and Ishan, what did they hope when they went into those panels? So let's get into that conversation. But just remember, as you are listening to all of these, that no matter how many conferences we have, nothing will happen until and unless there is support from people, right? There is implementation in all the countries which are party to this conference and sign these agreements, but you can sign these agreements as nothing binding. In fact, 2 times US walked away. Kyoto Protocol, Bush walked away in 2001. And we know more recently, Trump walked away from Paris Agreement when he became president in 2016, right? So we'll come back to what was the agreement that passed this morning. There is a lot of positive news, but it's only as good as the implementation. So, but before we get into that, let's start with Radhika. Radhika, I do see there may be a few other colleagues of yours, if you want to introduce them. And then for the benefit of the people who just joined, could you just give maybe a shorter version of what's your role at Columbia University? What's the group that you're a part of? Where, in what capacity were you representing? Were you representing Columbia at these panels? And then same for your colleagues there.
So yes, Vanita, thank you. I think Susan Haig has joined. I just want to give a big shout out to her. She is one of the spearheading person, leading person on climate news. And she and others are at the board, or she's actually the founding member of Civic Story, which is an organization here in New Jersey. And if you don't know about it, I can definitely send you the link. It's something that speaks to me a lot because it's about journalism, and we don't get to hear climate stories in mass media, mainstream journalism. So Susan, thank you for joining. If you can maybe say 1 or 2 words from your end, and then I can continue, if that's all right.
Sure. I'm sorry to be late, but I'm excited to be here and very much wanting to hear what the impressions were there. I was glad to see an article today in the New York Times about the food production. It was on the inside pages, but it showed kind of a nuance about the other aspect of what's causing global warming is the loss of forests and biodiversity. So I'm just glad to see that richer narrative emerge, and hopefully there was some of that at the COP. I look forward to hearing about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. So just
Radhika, can we have Venven introduce herself as well?
Yes, Venven.
Oh, hi. I'm Wenwen Tong from Purdue University, and here I'm an associate professor in Earth, Atmosphere, and Planetary Sciences, and I'm also a data scientist. And I got to know Radhika because of the SDSN network activity she was hosting, and there's a little bit of significance for me to join from Purdue because, as you know, that this is a Trump state. So very different perspectives we experience every day here, and very polarized on campus of Purdue and outside of Purdue. So the sustainable development message is very difficult to propagate outside of the Tippecanoe County I live in. But my position is that the conversation needs to go on, and we need to find activities that we can get mutual interest from the local stakeholders, such as farmers, especially farmers, that we can at least take action on some aspect of the sustainable development.
Thank you, Wenwen. And you and Radhika were participating in the same panel on youth eco innovations. Okay. All right. So Radhika, if you can now give us a little bit of an overview of what this Eco Ambassador program is, how does that tie into this panel, and what was, what made you think that Eco Ambassador should be participating in writing that report, contributing towards certain ideas, and then participating actually in COP28 with you?
Thank you, Vanita. I think Wenwen's perspective, this what she mentioned is that we only get one side of the picture and we don't see the other side. And so understanding every perspective is important. And that is why all of our 15 universities have combined forces to understand this is not one university or one person's job. We need to really understand where we are, bring in all wide perspectives and have a really concerted effort towards education, which is what we are doing. This panel is also a part of Mission 4.7, which is a group of like-minded institutions. When mentioned SDSN, Sustainable Development Solutions Network. We also have UNESCO, we have Ban Ki-moon Foundation, Ban Ki-moon Center, as well as Columbia University. So since I chair this Mission 4.7 and I'm based at Columbia University, I head the secretariat, and it was our role to showcase all of these universities at COP, and that's how we managed to organize this particular COP. And it was not just a one-off event. We were building towards it. As I mentioned during UNGA, previously we had also Education Summit when was a big part of working on a white paper, creating panels, discussions. So it was a work of 2 years. And I want to highlight this, that these events don't happen all of a sudden. You get the stage and you do this. It's a lot of hard work that we have put in to formulate thinking around what this panel needs to be. And since it was about eco-innovations, and I also run this a youth perspective on eco-innovations, I also run this program called the Eco Ambassadors. And this was a great platform where our eco ambassadors, who have again been working on eco innovations and have been again working on various different research projects, community service for many years, we decided to have 2 of our eco ambassadors who have continued this journey. I know so many who have continued this journey for a few number of years, and so we decided to have 2 voices, eco ambassadors, in the panel itself to make it much more intergenerational. We had one person from the Vatican, who was again representing Pope Francis, who led this whole encyclical on Laudato Si, and is focusing on and also fraternity, to bring in the global citizenship angle and the education for sustainable development angle. Then we had another person who focuses on when again was a scientist, because again, without scientists and without the science backing, we are I don't think we complete the picture on climate. And then we had other members on Mission 4.7 that were a part of this particular panel. So that's how this panel came about, working of number of years, and ultimately leading to this panel. And going forward, we have some plans as well.
So Radhika, I mean, I couldn't agree. You and I partner on a lot of community initiatives in our town on climate, sustainability, and different initiatives around climate change. And one of our constant, reminders is that, what, no matter how many times you think that there should be certain baseline information or education about certain ideas, but you just constantly find that there is misinformation, disinformation, lack of information, and certainly lack of consensus, right? So until and unless we have that, you cannot act on something until you really decide, you agree on something, right? So one of the problems we have had, especially in US, which has been even more pronounced in last 7 to 8 years, is that there just still does not seem to be any agreement on that. Yes, human activity is contributing towards climate change, and yes, we have a role to play in curbing it, right? There are still, many people who would openly say on national TV that climate change is a hoax, and that's perfectly acceptable, right? So that is troubling, right? That is troubling. But how do we change that? And how do you see, if you implement SDG 4.7, how do you see that playing a role in changing conversation? So I can totally see that the younger generation, right? I think they are much more in tune with these ideas. They are much more receptive to learning new things, right? And they will change if we provide them the right information. But my question to you is, your education only focused towards the youth, or is that also, does SDG 4.7 also focus on adults, right? Because I think we control politics, we control economics today. And by the time our youth are in power, right, in seats of power and doing and be able to make some changes, it might be too late, right, in terms of what they can do or cannot do. So is 4.7 also focused on changing, I guess, mindsets of adults?
Neeta, very good question again. And when please jump in whenever you feel you have a point to make, which I'm sure you have many. Don't let me override things because I can speak a lot on this topic. It is what I do. So definitely keep keep your mics open. I just wanted to mention that Mission 4.7 and SDG 4.7 focuses on adults, formal education through teachers. It focuses on community-based learning, informal learning, non-formal education. It covers the entire gamut. It covers teacher training. It covers many things. So it is basically bringing and curriculum change. It brings in all these different perspectives. But having said that, and having worked with many countries, with many ministers internationally, I saw that things are very slow, especially in the education sector. If you need to change curriculums, if you need to work with teacher trainings, if you need to work on textbooks, sometimes these textbooks are printed elsewhere. It takes many years to do anything with them. It was a very slow process and I became very impatient. I thought that this is really, meanwhile, I'm seeing generations after generations of students graduating without any climate content. And I thought that we need to really, break the cycle somewhere. And luckily, because of COVID, online education became rampant. And what I saw around me was our eco ambassadors. When we started, Vidya was there, a couple of others were there. They were very eager and they were saying, okay, can we do something? What can we do? What are the opportunities? I started to work on this Eco Ambassador program to directly reach the students. I bypassed everyone else and I wanted to really make a difference with students who wanted to learn. And so my Eco Ambassador program at Columbia University reached the students directly. We bypass schools, we bypass teachers. I don't think it's really the right way of doing things. Just because I wanted to make a difference and I wanted to make sure that it happens now. But the long-term impact can only happen when policies change, when UNESCO is making a difference, which they are, with ministers of education, which we are also working on. But Eco Ambassadors was a shortcut program for me. It's like, let's do it now and let's not wait for the system to change. Luckily, Tammy Murphy, our first lady, at the same time, a couple of years back, said that we need to integrate climate education, which is again historic. No other country has what New Jersey has in terms of policy. But implementation, of course, depends on the state, districts, depends on, school districts, how much importance they give, all the others. But we have all the right policies in place. So just to say that there are multiple prongs of ways of doing it. COVID taught us at the climate school, also at Columbia University, there is a program called EI Live program. If you haven't heard about it, I will send you the link. It again reaches the students directly. And these students are from middle school till people who are retired. Everyone wants to learn about it because there was no one generation that has completed this whole education in formal schools, in our school system, including me. I mean, I want to learn from Wen about, atmospheric data sciences that she works on. Maybe someday we'll get lucky and she'll do a nice, demonstration for us on her work. So similarly, we had so much access at the climate school that everyone wanted to, be a part of this program. And we formulated a program which includes GIS, story maps, GIS information, local stories, global understanding, because I thought those were all missing. And many students joined, and now it's like a global program. People join from Turkey and other places as well. So I felt that this has been the journey. But 4.7 includes a wide variety of types of education, including communication of climate sciences, which Susan here pioneers, and then many others are working on informal, non-formal education, which is all a part of 4.7.
Okay. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit, and maybe we can have our student eco ambassadors share their perspective a little bit. So I'll start actually with somebody who did not attend COP28 with you, Radhika. Suvid, are you here?
Yep.
Okay, so Suvid, can you share briefly, what does being an eco-ambassador mean to you? When did you start and what have you done in this capacity and where do you see yourself going with this? And why do you think it's important to you?
Yeah, sure. So I think I started as an eco-ambassador around like 4 or 5 years ago. I may be wrong, but I was just a little child. And I think like the first event that I attended was one of these like Millburn in the town hall, and like some students were speaking and some adults were also like informing us about climate change. And my mom had just taken me there to see if I was like interested. But I saw like so many posters. I saw so many like sorry. I saw so many young people that were like so motivated and so passionate about a topic that was actually like so urgent. And I didn't realize it then, but like now I know that like we have the ability to create like innovation and like kind of like spread the movement and like kind of lead the movement for this problem. And I've been able to do this through like various events. So for example, like in like the first few years I did some things for like a scavenger hunt and like poster walks to spread awareness, but recently I've kind of gotten more involved with my own passion projects, which include like research for a 2-month course in the summer with Columbia University. And I also like recently created an app which I think some of you know about. So yeah, those are the few of the things that I've done, and I kind of aspire to like use this in research and like kind of innovate like a real world solution to this. Because obviously, like just spreading awareness won't do anything. We actually have to take action and make like real solutions that will make our world more sustainable. So yeah, that's my view on the topic.
Thank you, Suvid. That was great. Okay, so all right, so now we'll move back to Wenwen, do you want to talk a little bit about what exactly is, besides this project that you're doing with Radhika, you're a scientist, atmospheric, the experiments you do. So can you share some of that with our kids and get them excited? Because a lot of them are very interested in science. And when you talk about technology and gadgets, I think that gets them interested.
Sure. Well, my research can be, I would say, categorized in two kinds. One is more strictly in data science. The other one is in atmospheric/climate science. And in terms of the latter, I think this is easier to connect to the younger audience, is that I study Arctic amplification in recent days. I study the moisture, the water vapor that's transported into the Arctic, and these moisture, they are really minor trace amount compared against the moisture that we get in the tropics. But then, this little amount can change the radiative balance or radiation, how the sun's energy is utilized, in the Arctic. And then it might contribute to the this phenomenon called the Arctic amplification. That means the surface of the Arctic, the temperature is amplifying, is increasing at least twice the rate of the lower latitude. And sea ice melting going on, and then resulting in sea level rise, and also it changes drastically the ecosystem in the Arctic. So, like for example, Alaska had a lot of permafrost, the kind of ice that doesn't melt at all, but then now they start to melt and exposing the soil underneath, and then that also release large amount of methane. That's another greenhouse gas. Okay, so that's what I'm interested in. I'm working on these days in terms of the atmospheric sciences. But my major tools are from data science, and which is a relatively new, pillar of scientific investigation. So it's a combination of math, statistics, and computer science all together, and then analyzing data in large quantity, and also model data using numerical methods, some very popular terms nowadays, things like deep learning AI are among the tools. But then the goals of these data science is essentially to estimate the mathematical representation of the phenomenon based upon data, and then to make attribution of how we see, how we observe in the data, to interpret, to make attribution. Sometimes can be physical, sometimes can be causal, and then and in the end, it's a prediction, using the data, the observation data, to make prediction for the future. So these are the goals of the data science I'm doing.
Do you want to share some
Okay.
of the predictions? I don't want to scare everybody, but I think we should hear the truth. So anything you want to share, something that, yeah, I mean, anything that you can share with us.
Oh, well, prediction, they are short and long range. So in atmospheric sciences, there are many different scales. That's another thing I like, is things with multiple scales. In different scale, there are different characteristics. So, so in atmospheric sciences, the prediction of weather to climate goes from, say, several hours. That's called a nowcast. That's usually for severe weather, and then to several days to up to 2 weeks. That would be short to medium long range forecast. And then beyond that, there is the seasonal forecast and then climate projection. So there are all these different time scale of making forecast. And then my most recent game using data is to do nowcasting, to do severe weather forecasting using deep learning method, and then taking in satellite data, large satellite data, to train the model to make really short-term but then very severe storm events in the Midwest. So that's one of the predictions I've been doing. And yeah, I think that's the more concrete prediction I can say. And then there are a lot of predictions out there, and I wouldn't say data science model are currently, I don't think they can outcompete the physical based model for climate prediction or climate projection. They are not there yet. They seem to be doing better in short term, like a weather prediction.
Yeah. So it must be really frustrating for you working with real data, real science, to still deal with people, especially as you said at Purdue University, who still deny climate change. How do you deal with the deniers? What is your general comeback, and anything that works?
I do what I can. I used to teach a large general education class, to teach climate systems, to teach Earth system dynamics to students who are largely non-scientists, and the reception is actually usually quite good. But I think the most frustrating would be the local stakeholder, the adults. And in terms of the adults, being scientists is not enough, because as part of the misinformation that's going around, even scientific process is being questioned. So it's not about integrity. It's really about the process even is being questioned. So simply being a scientist, I do not hold the weight to convince the local farmers or local stakeholder unless there is something that's mutually beneficial. For example, like the farmers here, they all remember the Dust Bowl in the 30s, 40s. Okay, so if we can use that as example and tell them no-till is a better practice, do not destroy your topsoil, and then they will take it. And then that's actually a better practice, to use soil as a way to decarbonization.
Right. I think you're absolutely right. And few, frustration. So a little bit about, a lot of the students here know me as Vinita, Auntie, Binny, Auntie, and, Ishan's mom. But, just want to share that I wear a few different hats, and why am I so passionate about climate change and environment in particular, and what do I do as part of my job that relates to this, does not relate to this, and how do I find other avenues to really fulfill, this desire in me to make a difference here. So one thing is that I'm a tax partner at KPMG. I specialize in doing tax returns for asset management industry, right? The financial services industry. But tax, the reason I chose tax when I did have to make a pivot to a different, U-turn in my chosen career path, which was actually to go work for the UN. At some point that did not work out. So I chose tax as my second choice because ultimately it's public policy, right? And our taxing and spending determines how the direction of our economy. It determines, how policies are formed, how they're implemented. So taxes impact every aspect of our life, right? So that's what I find interesting about it. But as part of KPMG, which is one of also a consulting firm, I can tell you right now, and I'll ask this I'm sure most of you know, but who knows what is ESG? Just raise your hand and explain it. Aryan?
Thank you for calling on me, Vanita, but ESG is basically a system for corporate interests to align with environmental, social, and governmental policies, like let's say cutting down fossil fuels, or another example would be something in the humanitarian space. That's the essence of it.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right, Aryan. The only correction I'll make there, so the G stands for governance. So that really talks about, you're governing policies, models for how a business is run. So generally we think of businesses, really their purpose is to make money. Their purpose is to give good returns to their shareholders, right? So the bottom line means everything. However, there is a growing recognition that businesses that do well long term, they have to protect their brand. So there is a financial, incentive for businesses to make sure that they're not doing anything that hurts their brand. So they're not doing they're not adopting any bad practices from an environmental perspective. They're not doing anything wrong from a social perspective, maybe using child labor in Bangladesh to produce their clothing, right? Because these type of stories come out and that has a real impact on their image. So this is sort of like a self, enlightened interest, right? That you want to do the right thing because that's gonna add to your bottom line, right? So ESG is that framework, but does it have any teeth? Is it something like if you want to do it, you do it. If you don't want to do it, it's up to you. And that has pretty much been the case so far in US. There is not really much of a legal mandate so far in the environmental space. I know some states have done more than the others, like California has some. But at the national level, ESG is really, we don't really have much teeth to the ESG framework. European Union, on the other hand, has come out with, in many different areas, they've come out with laws. So for instance, very recently, EU passed this law, or I don't know if they're in the process of passing it, but they came out with this ruling that none of the fast fashion producers can burn their clothing anymore. So I don't know if you guys know, but the problem of fast fashion is not just that we have this problem of too many pieces of clothing just floating around and, they end up in landfills. But the other side of the equation is also that really to maintain or protect their brand image, a lot of these fashion houses would routinely burn a lot of this clothing production rather than selling it for discount somewhere or letting it go to waste. They would just burn it, right? And that's a lot of waste of resources, because I don't know, they're just pretty. Narayan, I know you guys did some research on it last year as part of our town's Steam Fest on how much water it takes to produce one piece of cotton t-shirt, right? So if you think about it, if people are just producing these things and then burning it away, how much of a loss of environmental resources that is. So EU just came out with a law on that, but US does not have that framework, right? So I'm digressing here, but I think the point we were trying to come to is that, there is this aspect of one is information and misinformation. How do you change people's mindsets, right? And even science is not enough because, right, people that, there is just disinformation campaigns on science, right? People call climate change a hoax. But second aspect is, let's say, even if people agree, can we really make big, large scale change happen? And that cannot happen until it happens from a policy level. And that's where we'll come back to Radhika, because she ended her last commentary on, you started this Eco Ambassador program to bypass, sort of the bureaucratic hurdles you were facing. You wanted to reach out to students directly, but again, to make large scale change, now you're working with ministries of education in various countries to really incorporate SDG 4.7 as part of their core curriculum, right? So can you talk give a few comments on that, and then I think we'll go to Vidya and Ishan to hear about their perspective.
Thanks, Vinita. Yes, so I think what we are now seeing is that many school systems across many countries are saying that they don't have the curriculum to start doing what we hope that they will do, education for sustainable development. So they've made promises that yes, they will include education for sustainable development, climate education as a part of the curriculum, but how should they start doing this? So we are in the process of working on a course called the Ages of Globalization, which was also a part of our panel. Professor Sachs is the I guess the curator of the course, and we are working with him, a couple of us on the education side, to develop a curriculum that speaks to systems thinking. What is systems thinking? That climate education or climate related things should not just only be taught in environmental AP classes. It needs to be done from kindergarten till grade 12, across history, across social science, across art, across many different mathematics, including various different courses that you guys are doing. So how do we start doing that is what we are working on, and hopefully we've taken a spin on using history, we've taken a spin using art, heritage, to see how we have reached this place where we are and how the earth is sitting on a disaster, and what are the ways in which sustainable development framework that the UN has can be helpful to tackle some of these issues, but really getting an understanding on it's just not a science issue, it's also a faith issue, it's also learning from Buddhism and Jainism and Christianity, like so many different religions talk about taking care of our planet, and it's not taught. So how do we bring in faith? How do we bring in various multi-dimensional aspects of teaching climate education? I think that's something that we are now working on, and I hope that all of you will be involved in some capacity or the other, either to test the course or to give input to the course. And I'll send the link over right now, just so that you have a glimpse of where we are headed in the next year or so, but of course taking it forward and keeping it in the next I guess 5 years, 6 years is the span that we are working on for this particular curriculum.
Thanks, Radhika. All right, so let's Vidya, if you are ready, can you tell us a little bit, maybe start with something fun, just share your experience going to Dubai. Was this the first time you were going to Dubai? Your first impressions? How did you prepare for this panel? And then I know you and Ishan were there for a very short time, but the key impressions, what was your takeaway? What, surprised you, impressed you, disappointed you? Anything you want to note?
Okay, hi. I'm Vidya Bindal. I'm a sophomore at Millburn High School. So I mean, I've been to Dubai once before, but I will say that I've never traveled there by myself or, relatively like independently. So that was a very new experience to me. But kind of just in terms of like how the COP itself was, I feel like the biggest takeaway that I had from this was in our panel, we discussed like systems thinking, incorporating like a more systems solution for climate change, whether it be in like education, specifically, that's what we were talking about, but also, as was mentioned before, with pavilions such as like religion or like panels on like sports and climate change, gender and climate change, like that all also kind of conveys this idea of like a solutions mindset, a solutions solution. And I think that was something that was really really nice to see, where it was, okay, first of all, like, wow, like sustainable actions and initiatives are really being integrated into all different perspectives of life. Like as I was walking around the green zone, like there would be so many different opportunities to just stop and like see other youth innovations. Like they had a youth hub. But apart from that, it was also another empowering thing where it was, I don't say this as like, oh, it was empowering. Like it really was, because I mean, as an eco ambassador, you know, I've been told like, you know, say what you have to say about environmental activism. Like people out there want to hear what you have to say. And I've been told like, okay, just express what you want to say, like say whatever you want. And so I have, but at some point, like that statement just kind of turns to like, okay, like I'm going to keep saying this, but I don't know who's hearing it. Like I haven't gotten to actually like meet my audience, you know, like obviously like the supportive community in Millburn is great, but the idea of like this is a global problem, and I didn't get to meet many people globally who were, you know, who weren't just youth, who were people who like wanted to make change in different sectors and different industries with different power as well. And I think that was such a big thing, where when I went to COP, like just seeing this environment of people who cared about the environment was so, it was like really like a lasting impression on me, where it was just that like even just sitting in that panel, like it was like these are the people that want to hear what I have to say. But it isn't just those people. Like it really made me consider like the gravity of like what we were saying, where it was like, you know, this is green education, this is what we need to do, because sustainability shouldn't just be like a switch in your brain, you know, like, oh, like I'm gonna be sustainable today. Like that's great and everything, but the goal is to try to integrate it into every aspect of our lives, where it's like you don't need to be the person that's like, you know, waking up at 6 a.m. every day to like go protest that, you know, we need whatever it is. Like it just making like sustainable decisions and like conscious decisions was something that I also think I brought back with me, where it was like that is something that's so doable to kind of convey to my peer group, to people in my school system, in my community as well. So I think those were some really big key takeaways for me. And just in terms of kind of like what I was a little bit disappointed to see, I mean, I will point out that when we got there and we were being served the food, it was in like plastic cups, plastic plates. That was shocking. But apart from that, it was honestly everything that I could have hoped for and more. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity.
That's fantastic, Vidya. That's great to hear. Switch gears for a few minutes here before we get to Ishan. I also want to acknowledge that Sonali Sharma is here with us. She is actually going to bring a different perspective for us from a public health and climate change perspective, but we'll hold on to that conversation for a few more minutes. Sonali, you've been patiently listening in, but just a few more minutes here. So I want to ask one of the other students here, randomly go around the tree. I see you here. Do you want, I know you are, at least formally, I'm sure you've been doing work in this space for longer and you're very sustainability minded, but as a new active member of the Eco Ambassadors group, do you have any questions for Radhika on what does it mean to be an Eco Ambassador, or how can you continue on this journey, or what have you achieved, or what have you gained out of this experience?
Okay, so for what I've gained on this experience, it's been very rewarding, because just like personally, when you do something good for the environment, it feels really good. It's like I'm doing something that can actually make a difference. And sorry, it was just like a train passing by, but it's like what they say about kindness, doing something kind for another person makes you happy too. And I just really felt that while doing stuff for the environment. It it made me feel really good that I was making an impact. And I think the Eco Ambassador like program like that is very good, because it provides more opportunities that I probably would not have realized existed otherwise.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Sia. No, that's great. And Leela, you have your hand up. You want to add something? Is Leela here? No. Okay. All right. So, but on that note from Shreya, Ishan, I'll come to you. So I certainly have had the opportunity to listen to both Vidya and Ishan's speeches, and Radhika shared the script today on our Millburn for Climate Action group. But Ishan, I know you noted, you tried to connect some of the recommendations in the report with your own personal experiences, right? So can you share with us, what was the recommendation that really resonated with you, why, and what was your personal experience that you would like to share with this group here?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think thank you for everyone for joining. Firstly, it was just a great experience going to COP28. I don't think I would never imagine myself, having this experience. And I do wish we could have stayed a couple days longer. I think the day after we left, one of the biggest protests happened on Saturday, which unfortunately we missed, but I think it was just great reading about it and, just being in that environment. So yeah, the biggest, I think the most compelling, I think that was the wording, most compelling recommendation was just about mentorship. My earliest mentor, my mom, without her, I really wouldn't be kind of on this path. And then, since then, Dr. Iyengar and my mom, they've been guiding me on this path for, 5-6 years now. It's been so long. I started off with like a poster competition, I have it over there. But I think just starting off, getting that education from your mentors, guiding you on that path of environmentalism, becoming an eco ambassador. I don't think it would have happened without a mentor, guiding me. And I think so. One of the things that I found great about the Rewire Ed Summit was just in the opening ceremony, there were some very rousing speeches. The CEO of Divide Cares, gave an amazing speech, just calling to action everyone in the room. And then we saw this amazing movie that they created, and it was about the future. How there was this older gentleman who was on a sickbed, and his child, I'm guessing, she came out with a mask in a very polluted world, and the older gentleman started talking about the past, how you could go outside without a mask, you could see blue skies, you could see without land without pollution, you can see the greenery, and we don't want that world to come true. Another crazy fact that I learned was during Professor Jeffrey Sachs' speech during the opening ceremony. Of course, we know that education has amazing benefits for youth. It's the best way to set youth on the path to success. But something I learned just financially was education is a much better investment than even startups. I think he said it was a 22% annualized return, which is just crazy to hear. But one thing he said was just poor countries just don't have the access to funding. They don't have the access to resources to start that path. But something I just read about recently was that at that COP28 Youth Education Day on December 8th, there was a new $220 million funding package for Africa to promote their youth, promote their education, promote their health. So just I think overall, my biggest takeaway was I just came back inspired. I knew that going to these conferences, learning from people, seeing all the change being made, I could be part of that, whether it be raising awareness in my town, raising awareness through social media. I think it's been amazing experience. And all of that started from back in 5th grade when I was guided by my mentors, my mom and Dr. Iyengar, and that led me on this path to learning about all these different things. But one of the panels we had the opportunity to go to was about a post 1.5 degree Celsius world. So one of the main focuses of the COP this year was assessing the country's progress on limiting global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees Celsius. But the panel, I think, hopefully I pronounced this right, Andrew Kruchsiewicz. So he organized the panel and from Columbia University. So he talked about what are the potential impacts, humanitarian impacts from a post 1.5 degree world. So just learning about all these different things from all these different panels, it was just a great experience, and I hope that everyone can either read about it, hopefully everyone can have a chance to go there or go to one of these COPs or any even other environmental conferences. But yeah, it would never have started without mentorship, and that's something that was really stressed in the Eco Innovations report. And we can give this out, give like the barcode or like a link to it at the end. But yeah, so that was my biggest takeaway.
Thank you, Sean. That was great. So I know we also want to cover the public health discussion, but we're going to stop the recording before that. So I just want to make a few comments here before we move on to the next discussion topic here. So one is obviously, and Radhika, I'm speaking for you here, but of course, the Eco Ambassador program is open to anyone and everybody, right? I mean, of course, we look for kids who are self-motivated, but parental involvement, especially at a younger age, helps, right? So please, if any of the parents joining here, you want to learn more about it, feel free to reach out. Any of the kids, if you have any particular passion project you want to work on, you know where to find Radhika or me, and we can help you, organize your thoughts, create a community around it, and really go forward with it. I know, Ravneet, you're on the phone. I know you had reached out recently for Sachi for, perhaps figuring out a project in our town to recycle batteries or do a battery collection. So that would be great. I do want to ask one other student another question. Yes, Ayan, are you on?
Yeah, I'm on.
Okay, Ayan, so do you want to tell us a little bit about, I know you as a kid who is a math prodigy, who enjoys, who does a lot with that. You are a Boy Scout, right? But what exactly motivates you in the environmental space, and what have you recently done as part of the Eco Ambassador project?
So I mean, although like as you mentioned, I am very interested in like math. I feel like that's like only one side of my interest because I realized over time, especially in the past few years, that that's a very almost a very stagnant space, and the only way to like apply those skills, like for example, the best way to apply skills in mathematics or even in computer science that I'm very interested in is through environmental science because that's more of like a niche interest that I have. And like I'm extremely in terms of environmental science, I'm very interested not just in like the idea like not just in the idea of making change, but also in understanding the world through like the mathematical lens that I do have. In ways, I'm currently participating in a research project using AI to do wildfire detection with the mentor. And I feel like in that sense, I'm able to use my mathematical and like AI skills in order to actually make a change, in order to improve understanding of like short-term wildfire disasters in like Hawaii, California, which are very imminent disasters that I hope everyone here knows about. Um, but also in terms of just what I've done part of the Eco Ambassadors program, myself, Vidya, Ishan Akula, Aryan, Neil Ahuja, we've started a program. Um, it's called the Milkweed Miracle, in which we have began to reform the community garden at Taylor Park to include even more native plants than it already has. But the general idea is to spread awareness to everyone in this town about the sheer importance of implementing native plants because there's so many benefits, whether it be increased pollination rates or even simply more benefits like from an environmental or sustainable perspective with being able to like afford it or maintain it by the town with in terms of like the incentive as obviously the town would want to maintain these these native plants. So essentially what I'm trying to get at is that there's many, not everyone is like directly like has their roots directly in environmental science. Like I know that ever since I was young, I've learned about like computers and AI, but I think I've really enjoying being able to use that and apply that to environmental science, whether it be on a hands-on manner in terms of the Milkweed Miracle or with AI research projects in terms of wildfires.
That's great, Ayan. And I think you made a good point there that no matter what our interests are, right? I mean, we don't have to be professionally, this doesn't have to be our profession. This doesn't have to be our only passion. This doesn't have to be our hobby. But you really thinking about sustainability, thinking about environment should really be as natural as breathing, right? Because it literally is. You know, we cannot breathe clean air without having without dealing with climate change and having a clean environment, right? So Sonali, I know you just messaged. Thank you so much. You are able to speak to us and provide your perspective. So tell us a little bit about what you do and what were you, how were you at COP28? What panels did you attend? Yeah.
Thank you, Benita. Well, first of all, let me start by saying I'm so inspired and energized, especially listening to our eco ambassadors, because it's that is what gives all of us hope and optimism that all of you as the next generation are already thinking about it. I got into this area much later in my career, but so for those of you who I haven't met before, I work for Johnson & Johnson, and Benita, you were alluding to, corporates playing a pivotal role, or so we hope, in driving sustainable change and really trying to not do it as a lip service, but we as large corporations have a pretty large carbon footprint. And so I work for Johnson & Johnson, and I manage our climate, environmental stewardship, as well as human rights program. And so that's the hat I wore when I went to COP. This year I was there for almost 7 days. That was pretty much from the first day till Friday. So I'm pretty sad I couldn't meet all of you who were there, but it was an eye-opening experience as always. I've been to COP before. I would say what was very different about this COP was, especially for where I sit in the company I work for, is health was in the agenda for the very, very first time. It took us 28 years to get health on the agenda. I know Radhika, education was also on the agenda for the very first time. But really, the WHO, the World Health Organization, has really called climate the most dire public health crisis we face today. And for me, health is just another lever or catalyst or theory of change, rather, we use to really convert the people who don't believe. People might not believe about on climate science, but no one can deny the fact that this is affecting the health of a lot of individuals. There are 7 million people who die every year due to air pollution. There's another 250,000 deaths expected related to all sorts of infectious diseases, heat stress, cardiovascular, pulmonary burden. So you name it, every disease state is getting affected through climate change. And so that is real. And that's where at least, some of us who are working at the intersection of climate and public health, that's sort of the voice we're bringing to the table. We also work very closely with, again, they're naysayers of climate, but everyone believes they're doctors, right? The healthcare professionals are really on the forefront of being considered as, some of the change agents. So a lot of work which I do is really trying to influence healthcare systems. If the total carbon burden of just health in general in the world, it would be a 5th largest emitting country. That's the carbon burden of healthcare in the world. In the US itself, it's almost 8 to 9% of the carbon footprint of the United States. So healthcare, and of course the whole value chain of healthcare, is a disproportionate burden on climate. And so we can't really talk about affecting or changing the trajectory of health without changing the trajectory of climate change. They're so interlinked, and so are so many other causes. And I'm so glad many of you alluded to systemic thinking, because that's really what we need. And that's sort of what a lot of us are trying to do from our vantage point, making these interconnected. You can't, for example, I work for one of the largest healthcare products company in the world, and you can't really say we're going to protect human lives without addressing the carbon footprint we have. So they go hand in hand, and it's not about one or the other. You have to drive change, and you have to impact human health, but not at the cost of climate change, and vice versa. So that's really the reason I was there. And some of the ahas for me really were, and been to various climate events. my background, frankly, and I just wanted to discuss this, and I know Ayan, you mentioned it, and Vidya, you as well, which is no matter where you are, no matter what, you don't need an environmental science degree to really make a difference in this space, because what we really need is pretty much everyone, no matter what you do, is to integrate sustainability, right? So my own foray into this area was, I worked in the corporate sector. I have a business degree, and I was selling products and marketing things. And about a decade ago, I just wanted to move, and I didn't really know where to start. And I didn't have an environmental science background. I didn't have a sort of a science degree, which would lead me to this path. But it really didn't matter, because what you needed was people who were able to connect the dots, and people who were able to speak the language of who you're trying to influence. So in my case, if I'm trying to influence my R&D team to design more sustainable products, if I'm trying to influence my supply chain team to deliver in the most effective, low, carbon emission centric way, then I need to understand how business works, right? Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to influence the stakeholders I work with. So I pivoted to a public policy career much later in my life, and really wanted to work at the intersection of public-private partnerships, and being able to speak both languages, having worked on the nonprofit side, having worked I actually worked with the UN for a little bit, and then coming back full circle to the private sector, it allowed me to sort of connect the dots, because it's not just the public sector's role to solve for this. It's not just the government's role to sign on NDCs and make sure the emissions are reduced. We as corporates have to send, and of course, any I would say anyone who has the buying power or has economic incentive has to send the demand signal. Otherwise, the system is not going to change. So that's what we try to do. We have goals to get to 100% renewable electricity. We want to make sure that, I have like 40,000 suppliers across the world I can influence to reduce their carbon footprint. So there has to be a demand supply signal for this to work, right? This is not going to work with pure philanthropy. You probably read all the numbers on what was committed for the loss and damage fund. That's nowhere near what's needed to really address the issue. And then the only other thing I would say is that on the health side, it is a crisis. There was a whole sort of initiative, I would call it, launched by WHO, and they named like 4 grand challenges when it comes to the climate and health nexus. The very first one is sort of the urban air pollution crisis, right? Most of the air in the largest cities of the world, that itself is going to become the next epidemic. I was born in Africa, raised in India. I'm sure many of your parents have experienced the air we breathe. That is, we're just privileged in some parts of the world, very few parts of the world, where we're breathing clean air. Most of the world, that's not the case. Including here in New York City, right? If you look at the PM 2.5 levels, that's no longer the safest thresholds we need. So that's like one crisis. The second big one is infectious diseases. We had heard of vector-borne diseases, whether it's malaria, dengue, Ebola, the whole sort of animal, us deforesting, leading to more exposure to human and animal interaction, is creating a very new breed of infectious diseases we have no cure for. And it's not just malaria and dengue, it's a tropical disease. We're seeing the first cases of dengue even here in the United States. So it's no longer a problem of the global south. It's just happening everywhere. The third crisis, which was called out, was specifically around nutrition. There's a lot of underprivileged part of the world which will face the dire consequences of not having the right nutrition, and climate change actually affecting the whole food and ag production in a way where, even not getting into the science of it, but the macronutrients our body's not going to be able to absorb the way it is or it should. And last but not the least, the role of healthcare systems. And I do see some hope, because again, if the economic incentive needs to come from our customers. So the largest healthcare systems of the world, including quite a few here in the United States, have now pledged to net zero by 2050. And if our customers, for lack of a better word, or healthcare delivery providers really set a goal such as that, then the whole value chain, which I said contributes to like almost like 4% of the world's global emissions, they will be forced to make a change. So I think the I always say it's not just ESG, it's double ESG, which is environment, the economic incentives, social and governance need to all come together to drive change. And it was really good to see the healthcare systems are leaning in towards that. There was a huge delegate of healthcare providers who were there. It was fascinating to see that COP is no longer a conversation for just fossil fuel, in the energy sector. Finance turned up in a big way, health turned up in a big way. So going back to the systemic thinking we need, it was very gratifying to see, and I hope more of this change can be driven.
No, this is great, Sonali. I think you hit on so many points. Again, I think you talked about your journey from being in the nonprofit space, working for the UN, to now coming in the for-profit sector. I sort of shared a similar journey for myself. I studied public policy and then ended up in the for-profit world. But, one point I want to make for all of you young folks is that, we all, and I'm not, it's totally fine. I think we all find, the general heroes for your generation are probably Sam Altman, Elon Musk, and the people are doing cool things, taking us to Mars, which is great. But there are other people, right? So Aryan, actually, I'd like to hear from you. Can you share a little bit with us about, I know you are focused on native plants, soil health. You met with Doug Tallamy. Can you share a little bit with us, about your meeting with Doug, but Doug Tallamy, but about his book about nature's best hope? And the point I'm trying to come to now is that, yes, climate change is a problem with emissions, right? We clearly know that we need to reduce emissions, but there is an increasing recognition, and in fact, there's a whole separate convention on it, that nature itself is the biggest solution to this problem. Nature is very resilient, comes back if we give it a chance. And we need to really focus on nature-based solutions like native plants, going back to, restoring our soil health, because, once you do that, then that can help with flooding, that can have so many myriad of effects. So Aryan, can you share a little bit about nature-based solutions, or what do you make of, what else should, kids your generation should find cool, that this is really cool, I should really learn about this, and why?
Well, this is a very interesting question. I think it's very holistic, just like any other problem in the environment. I do feel that if fossil fuels were not a problem, biodiversity loss by itself would be a huge issue in politics. It would be just as important as fossil fuels. I think that our impact on environment has definitely caused, I'd say maybe around 25 to 50% of, I don't have any straight numbers here, I've done about any calculations. I think that around 25 to 50% of the effects of climate change have been caused by our destruction of the environment, our burning of trees and forests, our destruction of natural habitats where native plants, animals, and insects live, or destruction of coral reefs. I feel like if countries were to, in the next 10 years, just like how they're making goals to phase out fossil fuels, if they started making goals to restore natural habitats, give that land back to nature, just like Europe has done with its laws around rewilding and things like that, we would basically completely solve climate change. That plus our own emissions are really the only thing which matter.
But Aryan, can you focus on what can we do in our own backyards? Like, we all have a resource with our own front yards and backyards. And why is that important, right? I mean, and then maybe perhaps just introducing some of your co-eco ambassadors to Doug Tallamy's idea about the what's his concept? The homegrown national park, right? So what, yeah.
Right. So, as everyone knows, as humans have expanded our land, we have displaced most of the natural habitats that plants and animals depend on. These days, besides very rural areas which are slowly disappearing, national parks are the only densely populated wildlife zones, right? But that's not enough. They barely make up any space on a map. What the concept of homegrown national park is that if every home in America, or at least let's say 75% of them, were to turn their front or backyards, or both of them, into a space that supports natural habitats, primarily insects and small mammals, and maybe even things like wolves, coyotes, bears. Well, maybe not bears, but it would be 100, 1,000 times more land than the national parks which we currently give them. This would prevent extinction of several species of mammals and insects. It would restore the natural balance, and it would encourage a closer connection between our civilization and that of nature. I think it's honestly a very good idea, but the only way for it to happen is, one, to do it in your own backyard. Starting small by planting milkweed plants, other plants which encourage insects and perhaps small mammals from propagating in your yard, and to educating other people about this issue. I think that if we do that, we can very quickly spread the concept of a homegrown national park. And I think it's going to be popular just by itself, because everyone has this, I feel like everyone has had at one point this childlike desire or affiliation around plants and animals, right? Nature has always been a source of curiosity and inspiration for humanity. So I think that
reconnecting that, building
efforts.
that connection again. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Doug Tallamy's idea is really, if you take 20% of your yard, front and backyards, every American home dedicates that to native plants, and we can bring back the pollinators, the bees. That will create a national park that is 5 times the size of our protected national parks. And, that will go such a long way in restoring biodiversity and, restoring our natural ecosystem. So, Arden, this is going to be our project. I know, you're passionate about this, but again, so this group of students here, and we have many more, right? So one thing I want to say to all of you is that, so it said, and so did I, that brought a smile to my face when you remembered that. You remember when you were a little kid, your mom brought you to a town hall event and you saw many kids and some adults presenting something. So Radhika and I actually organized that. But who was our inspiration to do that? Our inspiration was another kid. It was Greta Thunberg. So it was in 2019 September. And Radhika and I met before that, and we were both doing our own things in the community around environment and climate change. And Greta Thunberg was in New York City in September of 2019 doing Climate Week, right? So we were talking about that, hey, maybe we should have a march in our town, or we should do something. We got to show something that, it really means something to us and our town. And we just very impromptu, we booked Bor Center, which is our, our town at Taylor Park, community center, and by word of mouth, we just, ask the community to come together and have a discussion on plastic pollution and other things. And it was really kids like Suved, Ishan, Aryan, Ayana, and Vidya, and everybody in this room, actually, you were all there, and you talked as little kids very passionately about plastic pollution and its impact to marine life. We saw pictures of whales washing ashore, dead with 80 pounds of plastic in their belly, right? I mean, so as a young kid and even as an adult, when I saw those images, it was like, this should be enough for the world to wake up, right? But it wasn't. Plastic, we continue to produce plastic with really at the same pace as it was. So there's so many problems, things don't change. But what you'll find is that change does happen. Maybe you don't see it, but you have the power to inspire somebody else. And then that person has the power to do the same for the next person. So please do believe that whatever you're doing, Vidya, you said that before, it makes a difference. and please be, I'm probably notorious for this. I bring climate change and environment into every conversation. I find a connection and I convert into that. Don't be a annoying nag like me, but please be vocal. Please talk about issues that are important to you. Please raise awareness. Please don't feel shy. You are doing the right thing. I think you should feel very empowered to speak up, right? In your school, in your communities, in your homes, with your friends. If somebody still comes to school with a plastic bottle, have a conversation with them. That, there are so many alternatives. Why are you still doing that, right? So that's something as little as that, or maybe inspiring your own family members to convert your yard into native pollinator gardens, right? Something as big as that. So there's so many different ways we can all continue to talk about this, make a change. I don't know if you all read some of the commentary that came out since last night when COP28 finally came to some agreement. People on both sides are disappointed, right? People who wanted change, who wanted to hear the word phase out of fossil fuels are disappointed. But honestly, I wasn't expecting that at all, that, that somebody would come and commit to phase out of fossil fuels in any defined timeline, right? But on the other hand, there is some promising language. But at the end of the day, whatever language the COP has means nothing because it's not binding on any country. It depends on each country to really go back to their own legislatures, to their Congress, to really find the funding, to find the support, to implement all of these actions, right? So what do we have at risk in US? As I told you before, twice we walked away. Two pivotal moments, Kyoto Protocol, we walked away. Again, Paris Agreement, we walked away, right? So we have this agreement, but it really is up to us as citizens of this country to show our support and make sure US sticks to the promises that it made at COP28, right? So read about these reports, learn about it. We can have a more in-depth session on it if you guys have particular questions on particular sections of the agreement. If it's something to do with healthcare, Sonali can help. On education, Radhika can help. So there are many different, and we have many other resources in town. So thank you all for joining. I wish it was a bigger crowd, but you know what? You guys are more than enough because I know you are the most motivated of the group we have. But again, as I keep telling you, make a promise to yourself to bring at least one other friend with you next time, because we need to keep expanding our tribe. People who really care about climate change and people who really want to see, restore the natural balance. Okay. So thank you all for joining. Radhika,
Can I
thanks.
make an invitation?
Yes, please.
Radhika. Yes, tomorrow our newsletter is going to have both an article about Doug Tallamy and the New York Times article about forests. But if you're interested in subscribing to Civic Stories newsletter, we would really love to publish some of your ideas, especially the students. So perhaps we could convene a meeting, because the other thing is the New York Times and the major media really need to be challenged, I think. There's good writing, but overall, you would never know there's a climate crisis when you look at the balance of information day after day. It just does not show the enormity of the crisis. So we need students who are interested in talking to those editors, and we would love to facilitate that. So Radhika, maybe we could talk about that.
Definitely, yes, Susan. I think it's a great opportunity. As
It's
you
the
can see, all our
time.
students have all these amazing ideas, and I'm sure they'll find a way of, crafting their
Yeah. Congratulations to the students. It was really great to hear you.
Thank you, Susan. That would be fantastic if students can share their, they can find that platform to share their ideas. And thanks again, Wen. That was wonderful. Again, if you are looking for some student interns to help you out, you know where to look. We have lots of motivated students in our town. And Sonali, thank you for sharing your perspective.
We are looking.
All right, okay. Yeah. All right, so thanks again, everybody, for participating. Radhika, any parting thoughts?
No, Vanita, thank you for hosting this. I think it's such a great, venue to have, and thank you for spearheading our group as always.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care, everybody. Good night.
Night.